What's up, guys? On this episode of Pistonhead Garage, it's part 3 of my Skyline build. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Pistonhead Garage. I'm Garrett, and today I'm going to be bringing to you part 3 of my Skyline build. And on today's episode, I'm going to be working on some wiring as well as reinstalling the new Crossmember for the engine. Alright, so before I do the battery relocate, I want to install the new Crossmember for the engine. This Crossmember is out of an S13 that I bought used. I just freshened it up with some paint. The installation is basically the same as the removal of the factory one. Just slide it onto the mount bolts and tighten it down loosely. Once it was supported by the car, I could then take the steering rack and sit it on top, and then I could take the mounting bolts and tighten them down properly. After that, I could reinstall the lower control arms and the lower tension rods, and then it was just a matter of getting into the engine bay and bolting down the top mounts for the steering rack and tightening everything up. And now I can start the battery relocate. Alright, so here's what I've got so far, my box of goodies. The box itself, of course, is important. This is the battery box. This is going to go in the trunk of the car, and it's going to hold the battery. And then there's a strap that holds it down to the trunk so it doesn't go anywhere. So this is what I'm going to do probably is put some holes here and here to run the positive and negative out of. So inside, a few things that I've picked up. We'll put this stuff aside for now. It's not quite related to this battery swap. So I've got some grommets here. The grommets I'm going to put in the holes that I drill here to run the cables through. Makes it look a little bit cleaner, a little bit more factory, I guess. And then in here, this is the negative battery terminal that I'm going to be using. There's just a protective boot on the outside. Terminal itself, you got to kind of push it out. So this is what it looks like, pretty straightforward. Battery post goes in here, tighten it down with these two screws here, and then these 3 bolts here you use to secure ring terminals. So you just connect your main positive, or in this case the negative wire, to here, and then you can run other negatives from other devices if you wanted to off the same one. It's pretty straightforward. Same thing with the positive, it's the exact same thing, it just has a little plus instead of a negative here. And then I'm going to run my main power as well as my fuel pump power, which I'll get into later. Then in the engine compartment, dump this out here. This is a distribution block. So the plan here is I've got 2 inputs that are bridged together. See, it's the same block. So my plan is to bring the 4-gauge main power wire into here, and then from there the power will get split up. So what I want is I want the starter to run directly off the battery because I want as much current going to it as it can, and it's typically not fused in the normal setup. So the starter will run off of this terminal here, and as you can see, you may not be able to see it very well, but this is a huge opening compared to this one. The nice thing about this kit, it comes with different fittings, so I can actually run another 4-gauge wire out of here and run the 4-gauge into the starter. Then I have 3 spots to put fuses, and they gave me 3 fuses as well that just kind of bolt on here. They're all 100 amp fuses, but I'm probably going to swap one out for a 60 or an 80 to run the fuse box. But so my plan for this side is the middle one I'm not going to use. It's also a 0-gauge plug, which I don't have an adapter for, so I couldn't use it if I wanted to. But the plan is for these two is one of these will run 4-gauge, which is what I have in here now, to the alternator, so I can get current from the alternator to charge the battery. And then the lower one I'm going to swap out with this smaller 8-gauge connector, and that's going to run to the fuse box, and that's going to power basically everything in the car that's not engine related Although it will also be powering the main ejectors and coils and all that sort of stuff, and it'll power the ECU. Pretty much it'll send power to everything in the car. It's not the start of the alternator actually. So that's going to run 8 gauge. It doesn't draw a whole lot of amps when it's running, so I don't need anything too hardcore. And that will cover everything. I do have an aftermarket amplifier in my car for audio, but I'm not going to run that off of this. Originally it was connected to the battery directly. What I'm going to do is basically keep it that way, run the cables to the trunk, and hook up the amp in the trunk. That way I can actually just run, if I wanted to run a second amp for the subwoofers or something like that, which I don't have, I can also run that off the battery terminal as well, because it's got the 3 plugs on it. So there's that. Now let me put this aside. I'll show you what else I've got for this wiring job. Okay, so here's my other box of goodies. In here you'll find I got 2 variety packs of heat shrink tube. So just various sizes from pretty small. I think it goes up to 13 millimeter, which is the largest in this pack. I shouldn't need anything bigger than that. So I've got 2 packs of that. I've also got some 4 gauge ring terminals. I got a 1/4 inch holes, which are probably going to be too small for most of the stuff I'm doing, but I got them smaller so I can drill them out if I need to. I didn't want to get something that was too big and have to run washers and crap that I didn't need. So there's that. And then I've got 2 different sizes of 8 gauge. I only need one of these right now that I'm going to be running to the fuse box, but I may end up using one of these for when I wire up the fuel pump, which I'll get into later. Also in here I've got more fuses. I've got 60 amp fuses here, which I'm probably going to run the fuse box. Actually, I'm not sure. The fuse box should probably run off of an 80 amp or 100. I guess I could use the 100. The 60s I just got just in case. And I've got a whole bunch more. I think 100 amp of these are? No, these are 150 amp. I have one part that's not on the way that I need. That is a 150 amp circuit breaker. And the reason why I chose that is because a circuit breaker will trip automatically if the current gets too high, just like a fuse would, but I don't have to replace it if I'm on the side of the road and I need to fix it quickly or just turn it on temporarily, whatever. I just turn it back on and away it goes. The third reason why I got the circuit breaker is because if I wanted to work on the car, I don't have to disconnect the battery, I don't have to open up the battery box to get at it. All I have to do is press the button on the circuit breaker, it disables the circuit, and I've got power cut off to the entire car. So that's awesome. And of course the last thing I've got in the box here, I've got 3 spools of cable. I've got black ground cable. This is 4 gauge. I've already terminated an end on this one kind of as a demonstration. I'll show you how I do that later on. I've got red power cable, 4 gauge, and I've got 8 gauge red power cable as well. This is sort of cheap cable, I'm not going to lie, but I think it'll be fine for what I'm doing. It's not going to be drawing a whole lot of current, like I said, and I'm not running any crazy sound systems. This is just going to be the basic power requirements that a car would have, and it's still going to be a heavier gauge than most of the stock wire that's in the car, so I think that should be fine. So wiring the battery into the trunk is pretty easy. It's basically just like wiring a pair of subs, except that the battery's in the trunk and you're sending power to the engine bay instead of the other way around. So all I did was feed the main power line from the engine bay down the passenger footwell, and then of course under the kick panel there, to the back, behind the back seat, and into the trunk. On the engine bay side of things, the 4 gauge power wire that I ran from there gets plugged into the distribution block and then to the side. And then the trunk, I'll just unspool whatever wire I think I need to reach the battery, cut it off, and then terminate it, and then it's ready to go. After I finish the positive wire, it's just a matter of doing the ground, and the ground's pretty much the same thing, it's a lot shorter, so it's really easy to do. I chose an existing bolt in the trunk to bolt the wire to, and I made sure that after I bolted it down, that I tested the continuity of the end of the wire that would connect to the battery with the chassis to make sure that there was low resistance, so that way I wouldn't have any hot spots. Alright guys, so let me show you what I got going on here. I kind of skipped ahead a bit. I didn't want to bore you guys with all the tediousness of this wiring job, as well as if I did, the video would be way too long. So anyway, here's the distribution block. It hasn't been bolted down yet, but this is where it's going to sit, nice and tucked in up there. And then from there, if we come to the back, of course the cable goes underneath the kick panel here inside the door, sneaks around back behind the back seat, and then comes around into the trunk where we get some light in here. So it comes in here. Let me just get there. So this is the trunk as it sits right now. Up here in the corner is where the cable comes in, and it comes to the circuit breaker, which is right here. Now unfortunately, the mount that I have the circuit breaker mounted to right here was supposed to be bolted to the car, and it actually isn't. I didn't realize that, so the whole thing's shifted, so I'm gonna have to relocate that. But in the meantime, it works. If I flick it on here, get some lights on in the trunk, so the power to the car is good. Turn it off there. And then up over here, this fuse right there is for the fuel pump, which then goes over to here. So up here, I've placed a new relay to power the fuel pump. The relay is switched on by the wiring for the factory fuel pump relay. So instead of the factory relay coming on, the power that would go to it just goes straight to this relay instead. So this pump will get powered up with full power, as the factory system limits the voltage to the pump under normal operating conditions. So that solves that issue. And then of course, over here is where the battery is going to sit. It hasn't been fastened down yet because I've got no lid on it. You need the lid on it in order to strap it down. And as you can see, I've got my battery tender hooked up to it right now to keep the battery charged up when I'm not using it. So that's where that's going to go. And that's basically it. It's the car has power to all of its major components. Headlights, taillights work, brake lights, all that sort of stuff. The interior is all powered up, all my gauges work. So it's just a matter now of wiring up the engine components to power and all the sensors and all that sort of stuff, but that'll be covered in a different video. So that's about it. Alright guys, that's it for this part of the Skyline build. If you like the build, make sure you give it a like. Subscribe to Pistonhead Productions on YouTube. I'd also like to take this time to point out that we still are working on our Soot Salon Cummins Miata charity build. And it's still going in full swing, so make sure you check out our Indiegogo page. I'll put a link in the description down below so you can check that out. Basically right now for donating you get some cool swag, as well as a ticket to win the car at the end of the season. That's going to be in November, so check that out. As well as keep an eye on our Instagram and our Facebook page for more updates on that build. So make sure you subscribe to all of that if you're not. Aside from that, as always, I'm Garrett, and I will see you next time on Pistonhead Garage.